Have you ever taken a pill every day without really knowing what it does? Because chances are, you or someone you love is on statins. Yeah, that cholesterol lowering drug that doctors hand out like candy. They are literally the most prescribed medication in the world. Despite hundreds of millions of people taking them, most of us don't actually know how they work, whether we really need them, or what they're doing inside of our bodies. And here's a whole lot of debate, from statins save lives to statins are overhyped. We are going to break it down without any scare tactics or sugarcoating it, just the real science, what the evidence says, and whether you should be taking them or not. Let's talk statins. Alright, before we dive into how these things work or whether you should be taking them, let's back up for a second. What even are statins? At their core, statins are medication that lower cholesterol. And if you want to know more about cholesterol, the myths surrounding it, and how it works in our bodies, I recommend you to watch my previous video about it. The link is in the description. But briefly, we talk about how LDL is often labeled the quote-unquote bad cholesterol. LDL carries cholesterol through your bloodstream, but if there's too much of it floating around, it can start sticking to the walls of your arteries. Over time, that buildup, that is known as plaque, can narrow the arteries, mess with the blood flow, and eventually cause heart attacks or strokes. So, back in the 1970s, scientists started hunting down for a way to stop that process before it even starts. And here's where statins come in. The first were discovered by a Japanese biochemist named Akira Endo, alongside Dr. Masao Kuroda. They isolated a potent drug that inhibits a key enzyme in cholesterol biosynthesis from the mold Penicillium citrinum. Initially, it was called ML236B, but now we know it as mevastatin. Today, we got several different types of statins: atorvastatin, simvastatin, rosuvastatin, pravastatin. Different strengths, slightly different properties, but they all do the same basic thing: lower LDL cholesterol. Doctors usually prescribe them for two main reasons. One, if you already had a heart attack or a stroke. Statins are used to reduce the risk of it happening again. This is called a secondary prevention. And two, if you've never had one, but your cholesterol is high and your risk is creeping up, they're used to try to prevent one from ever happening. This is called a primary prevention. That's the basic idea. Statins lower the bad cholesterol in your blood, so you're less likely to develop clogged arteries that lead to serious problems. But here's the key thing. As we've seen in the previous video, lowering cholesterol isn't just about your diet. A lot of your cholesterol is actually made by your liver, not just from the food you eat. That's why statins don't work like antacids or digestive enzymes. They are not reacting to what you just ate. They're actually changing how your body makes cholesterol in the first place. And that's where it gets interesting. So, we just established that statins lower your cholesterol. But what's going on inside your body when you take one of these pills? They are not flushing out cholesterol like some kind of chemical drain cleaner. They are not melting the fat in your blood either.
Nope.
What they are doing is way smarter than that. Statins work by targeting your liver, the same organ that filters alcohol and makes bile, and does about 1,000 other jobs you don't think about. One of your liver's job is making cholesterol, and it uses a very specific enzyme to do that: HMG-CoA reductase. Think of it like a machine on an assembly line. It's one of the key tools your liver uses to build cholesterol molecules from raw ingredients. Statins are like a wrench in the gears. They block that enzyme, slow down the production line, and as a result, your liver makes less cholesterol. But that's only half the story, because when your liver sees that there's not enough cholesterol in your system, it kind of panics, and it starts pulling more cholesterol from the bloodstream. It does it by creating more LDL receptors, which are like little docking stations on liver cells that grab LDL cholesterol from your blood and pull it back for processing. The result? Less cholesterol being made, and more cholesterol being cleared out of your bloodstream. Your LDL levels drop, not just because your liver is making less, but because it's also sucking more out of your blood. And these effects start pretty quickly. Within a few weeks of starting statins, LDL levels can drop by 30 to 50% depending on the dose and type. That's significant. Different statins work slightly different in terms of how strong they are. For example, rosuvastatin and atorvastatin are considered high intensity. they drop LDL a lot. Simvastatin or pravastatin are a bit milder, but they all work through the same basic mechanism: block the enzyme, reduce production, increase uptake, lower LDL. Now, does lowering LDL automatically mean fewer heart attacks? That's a whole other discussion, and trust me, we're getting to that. But for now, that's how statins actually work. So now that we know what statins are and how they work, here's the million-dollar question: who are they actually for? Because statins aren't a vitamin. You don't just take them to be healthy. These are real medications with real effects, and whether or not you should take one depends on your risk. Now, when doctors talk about risk, they are not guessing. They actually use risk calculators. For example, the UK has the Q Risks Tree, and the US has the ASCVD risk calculator. These tools crunch your numbers, your age, blood pressure, cholesterol levels, whether you smoke, have diabetes, your family history, and they give you a percentage. It tells you, here's your risk of having a heart attack or a stroke in the next 10 years. And if that number is high enough, that's when statins are prescribed. We can break it down into 3 simple categories, kind of like traffic lights. First, we have the red light. This is the no-brainer group. People who already had a heart attack or a stroke or been diagnosed with cardiovascular diseases. The goal here isn't to avoid a first heart attack, it's to prevent the next one. In this group, statins are proven to reduce the risk of future heart problems. We're talking solid evidence from multiple large-scale studies, like the Scandinavian Simvastatin survival study, that show fewer deaths and heart attacks among people who were taking statins after already having a heart disease. Now, we got the yellow light, people who might benefit depending on the risk. Now, this is where it gets a little bit more personal. This group includes people who've never had a heart attack, but may have high cholesterol or other risk factors, like diabetes, high blood pressure, or a strong family history of heart disease. In the UK, if your 10-year risk of heart disease is 10% or more, guidelines say that it's reasonable to start statins. In the US, this threshold is around 7.5%, but here's the thing, it's a conversation, not a rule. For example, a 45-year-old with high cholesterol but no other risk factors, they might hold off and focus on lifestyle first, but a 60-year-old smoker with borderline cholesterol, that's a different story. What doctors are considering here is the absolute benefit. Like, sure, statins might lower your cholesterol by 40%, but if your starting risk of having a heart attack is already low, your actual chance of avoiding a heart attack might only change by a couple percentage points. That might still be worth it, or not, depending on your goals, values, or comfort with taking a daily pill. Finally, we got the green light group, or people who probably don't need statins. If you are young, healthy, have low cholesterol, and no other major risk factors, statins probably aren't for you. Your 10-year risk is too low for the benefit to outweigh the effort of possible downsides. So, should you take a statin? Well, it's not about being told what to do. It's about understanding the science, looking at your numbers and making a choice together with your doctor that makes sense for your life, your goals, and your peace of mind. Because at the end of the day, statins don't work unless they are the right tool for the right person. We have seen what the doctors recommend, but what does the science actually says? So, over the last few decades, statins have been studied in dozens of massive clinical trials. I'm talking tens of thousands of people, followed for years across different countries, ages, and health profiles. And what the science consistently shows is this: statins lower LDL cholesterol by 30 to 50% depending on the dose and type. That drop in LDL is strongly linked to fewer heart attacks, strokes, and deaths from cardiovascular diseases, and the higher your risk to begin with, the more you benefit. Let me give you an example. There was a massive review in The Lancet that pulled data from 170,000 plus people in 26 different trials, and the result? For every small decrease in LDL, about 40 points in your blood test, statin medications lower the chance of having a heart attack or a stroke by roughly 21%. That's not a tiny difference, that's a game changer, especially in people who already have a heart disease. Now, let's talk numbers, and this is the part where a lot of people have issues with statins and the way they are reported. Imagine this. A doctor tells you that a statin will reduce your risk of having a heart attack by 25%. That sounds huge, right? But wait, 25% of what? That's called a relative risk, and is a way to describe how much your risk is reduced compared to not taking the drug. Say you are in a high risk group, maybe you've already had a heart attack, or your 10-year risk of a cardiovascular event is 20%. That means that out of 100 people like you, 20 would have a heart attack or a stroke over the next 10 years without a treatment. Now, if statins reduce that risk by 25% relative to the original, you don't drop from 20 to 0.
Nope.
You go from 20 to 15%. That's an absolute risk reduction of 5%. So yes, 25% relative risk reduction sounds impressive, but the absolute reduction, the real world difference, is 5 out of 100 people avoiding a major health event. And if you're one of those 5 people, it raises an important question. Is the benefit worth the daily medication? Doctors look at absolute risk when making treatment decisions, not just the headline-grabbing relative numbers. In the end, it's about making informed choices, not just reacting to impressive-sounding numbers. Now we talk about what statins are, who should take them, and how well they work. But here's the part everyone's really curious and sometimes nervous about. Are they safe? You probably heard some things that sound scary. Muscle pain, liver damage, memory problems, and you're probably wondering how much of that is true. First, muscle pain, the most talked about side effect. Muscle pain can happen with statins, but here's the twist. In large clinical trials, the rate of muscle symptoms was very similar in people taking statins and those taking a placebo, which is like a sugar pill that doesn't have an effect in your body. A meta-analysis study with over 123,000 participants showed that 27.1% of those taking statins reported muscle pain or weakness, compared to 26.6% on placebo. Most muscle-related complaints weren't actually caused by statins. Fewer than 1 in 15 cases could be directly attributed to the drug. So sometimes muscle aches might not be caused by the statins at all. They could be from exercise, other medications, or just your everyday life. Now let's move to the liver side effects. What's the deal with that? You probably read that statins can hurt your liver. After all, that's where they work at. And it is true that statins can cause a slight increase in liver enzymes in the blood, and this sometimes worries doctors. But these elevations will spontaneously fall back into the normal range, and according to the US FDA, actual liver damage from statins is very rare. There have been stories about statins causing memory loss or confusion, and they mainly come from cell reports from the FDA reporting platform. Scientists have tried to find evidence supporting these reports, but most researchers have found no strong evidence connecting statin use with cognitive issues. So, the official stance from big organizations like the FDA and the American Heart Association is that there's no convincing evidence that statins cause permanent cognitive problems. There's a lot of misinformation online, and some people blame statins for all sorts of problems. But remember, no medication is perfect. The key is weighing the risk versus the benefits. For the people who really need statins, the protective benefits far outweigh the small chance of side effects. And if you do have a side effect, there are ways around it, like lowering the dose, switching to a different statin, or trying alternative day dosing. So here's a question that comes up a lot. If I eat well, exercise, and live a healthy lifestyle, do I even need statins? It's a great question, and the honest answer is sometimes yes, sometimes no. First off, lifestyle changes are absolutely crucial for heart health. Things like eating a balanced diet rich in fruits, veggies, whole grains, and healthy fats, staying physically active, quitting smoking, managing stress, and getting enough sleep. All these have a massive impact on lowering cholesterol, blood pressure, and reducing inflammation, the root cause of heart disease. In fact, some people with mildly elevated cholesterol might bring the numbers down just through lifestyle changes alone. But lifestyle isn't a cure-all. Here's the catch. For many people, especially for those with a history of heart disease or a very high cholesterol, lifestyle changes aren't enough on their own. Why? Because your body plays a huge role in cholesterol levels and how your body handles fat. Some people have inherited conditions. And for them, no amount of kale or running will get their LDL level down to lower the risk. For most people who take statins, the best results come when medication and lifestyle work together. So, a lot of people ask, if I get my diet and exercise on point, can I just ditch the pills? That's something to chat about with your doctor. Sometimes improved lifestyle can lower your risk enough to reconsider medication. Other times, statins remain necessary to keep risk low. Statins are one of the most studied and effective tools we have to prevent heart disease and saving lives, but they are not a magic pill. The best results come when you combine them with healthy habits and informed decisions. So, if you are on statins or thinking about starting them, be proud that you're taking your health seriously. And if you're still unsure, just remember, the best choice is an informed one, made with your doctor's guidance. I hope you learned something new about statins, and if you found this helpful, hit that like button and subscribe for more scientific content. Stay curious, stay healthy, until next time.